Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, in Team Season Preview 26 out of 32, I was joined by the Turn Up For What podcast's Euan as we preview the team's upcoming season. Euan discusses their defence.
With something, and there's a lot of talk early in camp that he could potentially be our best player in our squad, and I think that's how good the guy is.
Euan also discusses the run game after the Joe Mixon injury.
Now, David Pierce could come back and be a revolution.
And Euan predicts the team's overall record in our win, loss or tie segment. Hope you all enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, and here for another team season preview and 26 out of 32. So we're well on the way towards completing our challenge for the fourth year in a row where we do a season preview for every team with a fan of every team. Now, today's team of focus is the Houston Texans. Now, with us today is not a normal guest, Graham. Graham is unavailable this offseason, so he recommended to me a worthwhile substitute, a worthwhile super sub. With us today is Euan, otherwise known as Turn Up For What. Euan, how are things? How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you very much for the invite. I'll try my best to fill in for the G-Man as he's busy now. But doing all right. Pre-season is back, and as pointless as it might be a little bit, but absolutely, just ready to get the real stuff coming around again. So we're almost there.
Almost there. I mean, right now we're recording this on August the 11th, so we are edging ever closer towards that year. Preseason has begun. For every team, bar Lions and Chargers, just one game. We are in that stage. Personally, I've said it before, I don't watch preseason, so I've only seen snippets of what happened this week. So I think it's just now waiting those few weeks, and then sit down on September the 7th. Should be a fun first week. Now you are, for the first time in this off-season season predictions, a brand new guest. Your first ever new guest onto our 2025 season preview. So we like to ask all of our new guests the same question as to why you picked your team. So for you, what made you a Texans fan?
I had a friend that got seconded there, just obviously sort of Scotland, and Houston's got quite a big connection with sort of oil and gas, despite some of the rising views in the UK on some of that. I think there's it was my friend got seconded out there, went and visited him, and he said, I've got 2 tickets for this game. Do you want to go along? I was never that really into the pigskin really at that point, and I just said, yeah, why not? And we went, and I've gone back every year since. It's been something that's been just a big part of my life, and the people of Houston. There's a lot of similarities really between sort of being where I'm from and where a lot of the guys that have become friends are all from, and I think that sort of Southern hospitality and the inclusion that they've, or the sort of welcomeness that they've given us, I think they'll never be, and we've got to thank them enough really. So it's been a sort of mainstay of my life since then. So this is apart from the one COVID year where it was all shut down. The pandemic, it was it'd been just always go twice this year again, and I love it. It's become a big part of my life. I just like to see a bit more success than I have done probably.
Yeah, I get, and I'm trying to gauge about what kind of time this was when you got those 2 tickets to watch your first Texans game. What year was this?
So that was 2012. Mario Williams was making his debut or his return to Houston after signing the big deal. Doesn't seem that big now versus some of the deals that they're doing. I mean, no more than JJ and then his brother's deal. I think it shows you the explosion of the salary cap and in the international expansion, which has fed into league coffers and sort of ballooned these contracts. But that was then. Matt Schaub was at quarterback, and before he kind of fell off the year after, and it felt like on a crest. I think they went 7-1 or 8-1 that day. You still had prime Andrew Johnson. You had Arian Foster, who was probably my favourite player of all time that I've seen play. And then and then he was there for a couple of more years. And then the moment that really stuck actually was the year after I went, or no, 2 years after we went to Dallas. I think we must have taken about 40,000 people were there in Battle Red, and we lost in overtime to Tony Romo and Des Bryant, but it was a hell of a game, and that was the moment I just thought, I'm going to have to keep doing this because it's quite, there's a level of addiction and hope, I suppose, as a sports fan, and albeit cost control is the real reason, right? But the parity that the kind of structure gives, you're always never too far away. You're only a couple of years away from being all right again. So looking forward to this season really, and just I've obviously got some big reservations about this from some of the structural issues in this team, and I don't think we've addressed them appropriately. But I don't think we're too far away, and I think that's the bit that, as long as you feel like if things go your way, or it breaks the right way, and you stay relatively injury free, you'll have a chance. And I do believe we do have a chance. It's just a case of learning to fight with the big boys at the top end. It's a mentality as much as it is skill, and I think that's the bit we just need to kind of learn and develop, because it's quite a relatively young team.
Yeah, I think certainly, when you first started supporting a team in whatever sport this is, I think maybe the first few weeks or the first month or year, your team could lose and you'd be absolutely fine with it. It wouldn't bother you. But I think the moment when you get affected by a result and you are gutted when you lose, then or really ecstatic when they win, I think that's the point, I think, where you turn from being, oh, this team's not too bad, to then, oh, actually, I'm fully invested. So I think I can see how going to watch a game live, seeing the overtime game, that must add to it. I must really add to that level of fandom, and it must be the real turning point. You mentioned then about some of the incomings and offcomings. So looking at the off-season as a whole, with free agency and also re-signings, the Texans brought in the likes of Nick Chubb, Cam Robinson, Mario Edwards, as well as Justin Watson, Darrell Taylor, Laken Tomlinson, Derek Barnett, EJ Speed, Trent Brown, Ronald Darby, Braxton Berrios, and Miles Bryant. And you lost the likes of Laramie Tunsil, Stephon Diggs, Jeff Okudah, Case Keenum, Robert Woods, John Weeks, Kendrick Green, and Devin White. And in the draft, your first 3 players taken were Jaden Higgins, wide receiver, 34th overall. Of course, no first rounder due to the trade you had a few years ago to get Will Anderson, as well as tackle in the 48th overall pick in Arianati Ursi, and Jaden Knoll, wide receiver, 79th overall, as well as Jaden Smith, Woody Marks, Jaden Reed, Graham Mertz, Cleonte Hamilton, and Luke Lackley. Euan, for you, your take on your team's off-season as a whole.
Yeah, a lot of names there, and obviously it goes from March right up till now, and you're still adding players, and there probably still are some players to be added. Is there going to be potentially a trade at some point? Yeah, quite possibly, I think so. There's a long, your season's not, or your roster's not, never standing still. And I think Nick Caserio definitely believes in that, turning the bottom of the roster. And I think the Tunsil thing was a big move in some eyes. I think I think all the talent's there. I think whether the mentality and the desire to do well for anybody else apart from yourself, I think, is maybe another question. False start penalties aside, I think they're obviously one of the top sort of 2 or 3 tackles in the league. Not every week though, I think, and that was statistically, it was probably his worst season. So the offensive line is rightly so the kind of concern of this club, and I think the sort of logic, or to trade away your best player within that group doesn't necessarily make sense on the face of it. But I think they wanted to reshape the mentality, reshape the commitment to the run game, I think, which we just didn't have, and we really struggled to run the ball, which is not a good formula. If you want to be playing football in January, you've got to be able to run the ball, particularly on the road. So it doesn't necessarily make sense probably to the outside, but yeah, I think there is some kind of underlying logic there that I hope will pay dividends over time. It's a good package, nothing immediately in this year, but it'll be in future years that we can fortify this roster, because we've got some big deals coming up. We signed obviously Stingley in this off season, which was punchy. You've got Will Anderson, who's going to need a deal, and you've got CJ Stroud, that's going to need, probably both will get market leading deals, right? Whether you think them or not, they deserve them or not, they will get them. So I think the future of this team was almost kind of it was kind of ensured a little bit by that trade, I think. But then also that leads to the question: what happens in this season now? I think my concern is that you've got a lot of guys there who aren't necessarily, anywhere near the top of their game or top of, the position rankings. I think, right across the 5 spots, and it seemed like they'd kind of settled on it with Cam Robinson starting at left tackle. But if you've seen him over the years, he's not necessarily the most consistent player, I think. And obviously, he was traded in Minnesota when they lost Darius Shaw last year, and then he ends up being a sort of $9 million free agent. I don't really think that's necessarily the way to go. But there was a lot of Minnesota. We just played Minnesota there on Saturday, and they signed both Ryan Kelly and Will Fries from the Colts to try and remake their offensive line, and drafted the guy at Ohio State High. So I feel like we've done necessarily the best job of it. I think they were desperate in the draft to get up and get one of those top 3 or 4 guys, but they all go early, right? They don't hit free agency. You've got to really draft at that position, because good players just don't make it out of the club without a contract. So that's a big concern, I think, and that will continue to be one. And then I think you mentioned Nick Chubb there as well. I think the ghost of Nick Chubb, I don't think necessarily was the perfect backup option to Joe Mixon, who's dealing with an injury. He was questionable to be ready for week 1. And I think it's very clear that they've underinvested at that spot, and I think, Saquon Barkley showed everyone last year that if you get it right, it can be, the biggest, as big as a asset as a star wide receiver, and they don't get paid like it, but the importance of that position is still there, and I think it's been undervalued, for a time in the league, and just think you can get away with it, and you can, I think, if you invest in your O-line. But I think we've kind of done neither, so that the ability of the run game, the ability of a new offensive coordinator to come in and implement his scheme, which is, by snippets from, player interviews, they say it's very similar to the Bill O'Brien era, which there's not a huge Texans fan that will be out there that would be a huge fan of that, because it was inconsistent at times. So there is a hope that that scheme will come in and be successful. But we had one good year with Bobby Slowick, and then it just fell away. So if Nick Caley can come in and call a good sort of hybrid scheme between what he learned from McVay and what he learned in New England, then you might be successful. But not having Mixon out there, not having a settled O-line, having relative youth at wide receiver as well, top 2 picks, both from Ohio State, with Noel and Higgins. Both look like they've got a lot to offer. I think it was a really good Ohio State team that got done by a refereeing call against Texas, and they probably would have gone further in the competition if not. So, there is investments as there is a nursery. The nursery's gone out to left tackle when Cam Robinson went down, but then your plan at right tackle then all of a sudden is defunct, and you've got the guy who was slated to be the right guard, and Titus Howard, who's never quite performed up to his draft billing or his contract, or being healthy enough. He then is out at right tackle all of a sudden. So both those positions and the importance of that, and the importance of protecting CJ Stroud, and not giving up those up the gut pressures that the A and the B gaps just kill any play, really. And even the greatest of all time, that was the one thing he really struggled with the most, because there is nothing that'll kill a play quicker than a free rusher up the middle. So I think we had that far too much last year, and it killed so many drives and limited us in so many points. We lost so many games that we should never have lost because of just simple mental mistakes. Now, does it look better from all the reports in training camp and kind of what we saw, in a lot of kind of snippets, and by all means, not all the starters in Minnesota on Saturday. Yeah, it probably does, and I don't think it could look much worse than if it didn't. I think you'd be, there's a reason why the offensive line coach got, was sent back as was the OC. So, I think, there is concerns on the offensive side of the ball, but I think, I don't think there's any doubt that this defense probably will be the best in the league this year. I think this is going to be a serious unit. You've got the best corner combination in the league, and you've got the best pass rusher combination in the league. And I struggle to see a squad that can rival us, bar a couple. and I think maybe Denver, Philly, maybe and a couple others, but this squad is and maybe a bit in Baltimore, but this defense is gonna. I think it's going to shock some people how good it is, and I think D'Amico Ryans will be not earning his pay packet, but certainly enjoying that part of his job by calling this D, because I think there's just such flexibility. Long as you all stay healthy, I think there's a really good chance that they could do something this year now and hand the ball back to the offense in good positions in short fields and keep points down and keep other teams off the field. And I think that is the ultimate dream. I think if this defense can come together and be truly championship caliber, and say, can you win championships with defense alone? No, this offense will have to find new heights that it didn't necessarily in the previous year. But if you get close to that CJ Stroud rookie year, which was much heralded, and rightly so, if you get closer to that, and this defense takes the jump I expect it to, because I think there's quality. And there's real talent at all three levels, and to have Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on your edge is something I think a lot of teams really struggled to cope with last year. Were they consistent enough? No, but I think Will Anderson, if he doesn't get his ankle rolled up on the Thursday night in New York on that god awful pitch, I think he's probably on the cusp for defensive player of the year. But that just kind of stemmed his momentum, and I think with Stingley as well. I think he's a genuine superstar at corner, and I think probably not enough people are talking about him. But the emergence of guys like Kamari Lassiter, who never really had many interceptions at Georgia, but yet comes up as a full handful in his first year. It was something, and there's a lot of talk early in camp that he could potentially be our best player in our squad. And I think that's how good the guy is, and to draft Kalen Bullock from USC. And then to get CG Gardner-Johnson on the back end, hopefully his knee checks out okay after a bit of a scare the other week. There's just so much to skate other teams, and to be the coverage will marry up with the pass rush. And if everybody stays healthy, I think this defense is going to be a hell of a watch this season. I'm excited for that. But health was always one. We had many years where you had Clowney, Merciless, and Watt. All on the roster, but they never stayed healthy at the same time, and you never really saw the best of it. So there's one thing on paper, there's another thing in actuality and actually performing every Sunday. But yeah, it's been an interesting offseason. We've not really added any big names. It's just been rookies and some roster fillers. But I think that the CG Gardner-Johnson trade, I think, was the one that just kind of maybe pushed us over the edge. But then Jimmy Ward decided to get himself arrested twice, so it kind of limits you a little bit depth, and so does the rookie safety gets himself injured as well and doesn't make it to West Virginia training camp last week. So nothing's ever standing still, but I'm confident in 60-75% of this roster. I think that we'll have a meaningful impact every game with Sunday. Should they all stay healthy and attain a relative level of form.
Yeah, I mean, that defense was one of the highlights of last season. You think about looking at the stats. I mean, you had the fifth best defense when it came to total yards allowed, sixth best when it comes to pass defense. You had the 11th best run defense, but I think the one I let you down was probably the points, where you were well into the mid to late teens when it came to points allowed in 2024, and that a lot of that probably comes down to what you mentioned before, was a poor O-line. I mean, looking at CJ Stroud, he had the second most sacked quarterback in 2024. Only Caleb Williams was sacked more, and that was a guy who had the third most sacks in any season in history. So it's not really great company to be around. And looking at further on, Stroud was in the top 45 most sacked single seasons in history. I think it was tied for 39th. It was, not a great showing from the Texans in that sense, and I think they have to really be careful with Stroud, because whilst he's been great the first 2 years, both years he won playoff games. You think about the first year especially, kind of took you by surprise by winning the division, getting into the playoffs sort of ahead of schedule, and then going to the game against, I believe it was the Browns, and you beat them, and obviously went out both years, but both years you went out were to Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. So it's not as if you're losing to
Yeah,
like Joe Flacco,
yeah.
or I think with Stroud, I think he's proved that he can win games in spite of a bad O-line. I think one thing I always get from watching Stroud is, as good as he has been, just imagine how good he could be if the O-line was actually up to scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I was there in Kansas City. When you get the ball in the red zone, 8 points down, and you don't put any points on, you miss a field goal, you go for it on fourth down, fourth and 10, it's the kick of a field goal. You give up a play on the first kickoff, the first play of the kickoff of the game, and give them short field. Then you add in some, phantom bullshit calls from the refs, which like being in the stadium that day, a lot of the guys, there was one point I just, uh, was beside myself with. I couldn't believe what I was watching at one point. And and one of the guys actually said to me, "Because look, we know we were getting the rub of the green with this. Like we're well aware that that's not a foul, So it's kind of good to hear that. But that was a day, and I was in Green Bay last year as well, where D'Amico said after the game, this can't continue, and it did continue. And they probably were too loyal, and they were probably too respectful and too trusting of people that were continually letting them down. And I think even despite all the problems that they had on offense, the two-time Super Bowl winners, we were in their backyard, and on another day with just one or two plays going your way, I think you probably walk out there with the victory. So it feels like we're close, but everybody gets better, and I think Baltimore's always going to be the hard out, as is Buffalo. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful about, I think, but it's just, like you said, the giving Stroud time. But I think that comes with getting the ball out quicker, having better short to intermediate route runners, having a better run game, finding, being efficient at screenplays, but we just couldn't run them at all last year. The play calling became very stale. It was very, one-dimensional. We barely, were able to throw it long, and probably, he's probably a top 3 player on this on this team. But Nico Collins, I think, he misses 5 or 6 games. Diggs misses half the season. So despite, and Tank Dell gets a horrific knee injury and he might never play again, so despite all that, you were still in that position. And I think the team's definitely not, has it got it better definitively? Probably on defense. I think the special teams have invested in bringing, like Trey Smith back and all these kind of guys that have come in and they've got specific roles on punt and kickoff coverage. So, I think we're on the cusp. I think just every team under the salary cap will always have flaws, and I think that's the reality of it. I think it's just how well can you mask those, how well can you scheme them, and how well do you coach these guys not to make mental errors, because we made too many mental errors in a big game last year. And then you've got the ghost of Travis Kelce with these sort of, with these overtly public relationship rubbing it in your face every 2 minutes, when that wasn't the biggest threat he had on the field, but we allowed it to be for whatever reason. And that was predominantly because Al Shazier missed the game, or certainly was missing time and then missed the coverage. And then Christian Harris gets hurt as well, who's kind of making his way back. But again, a really important, linebacker who can cover tight ends in space. So Jalen Petrie gets injured, who would have, been sort of secondary or tertiary in that role, and all of a sudden, you've got flaws you didn't think you had. So, this team is close. I've got no doubt about that. But it's just, there's so many factors, and that's what makes it interesting, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably for Texans fans a lot of scars when it comes to Arrowhead. You think about what happened in the 2019 season in the division around Arrowhead, and then what happened last season. And I remember watching that game and just exactly what you said. I just couldn't believe the amount of mistakes they were making, and that could have easily been a Texans win. I really do believe that. And going into this season, of course, you didn't talk about it before, but of course you've got interesting running back room with Joe Mixon's ankle injury, as well as Nick Chubb was questionable for the Vikings game pre-season, and there's no guarantee he's going to come back and be the player he was before the injury. I think you would suggest potentially he's not going to be the same running back, but as a running back too, you can maybe get some sort of effect out of him. But with them both injured right now, it could be seeing Dameon Pierce start week 1.
Yeah, I think that he was very much a victim of the change of system. I think when he played his rookie year, we ran predominantly a power and gap scheme, which is mostly what Nick Keeley will lean into. Like a lot of dual runs, a lot of splits, and I think he will thrive in that. And ironically, Joe Mixon's a bit more of a zone kind of single cutback lane kind of runner. But I think he's kind of scheme neutral in the sense that he's such a quality player. But I think when you're missing time in a new system, with new terminology, with new play calls, with a new line, that he's got to learn how they block and how they go to attack. At the point of attack, how where's their foot hand placement? They're going to give him the best idea where the cutback lane is going to be. He's missing that time, so that's not great. I think there's no definitive choice at centre yet as well, which I think is a problem. It shouldn't be a problem, but it definitely is. So, and I think, at this stage of his career, he just started. I think he had sort of his best couple of days in camp and then missed time. So, if Nick Chubb can just be a guy who kind of bangs it through the bangs it through tackles for you every so often and gets you some hard yards and doesn't give up cheap yards, he might be serviceable. You never know, when you can never count these guys out. They put their life into this, and they don't want to give it up easily. But running back's the one that takes the most wear and tear of any position in the sport, right? So when it goes quick. Second to corner, when the legs go and you can't cover anymore, you're not used to anyone. So we'll see where he gets. I've got no real hope or reservations of that. I think we will ultimately at some point lament not investing a decent level of pick the day two in a running back for the last 2 years. Now, Dameon Pierce could come back and be a revelation and look like what he looked like, but he's had trouble staying healthy. So the last couple of years as well, he's missed a lot of time, and he's kind of been a punt returner effectively, because that was zone blocking. So, it was gap scheme blocking by definition. So he could read that, but he really struggled by his own admission. And some off the field stuff that he just struggled to kind of adjust to that West Coast scheme. Now we're moving away from that. Back to this sort of game plan, hybrid offense, whatever Nick Keeley's going to hold. And I think that's probably going to be our biggest advantage, if Nick Keeley can come out and call games and have an element of surprise, because people aren't quite sure what he's in, because he's kind of multi-schooled. That might be our advantage that this offense needs. The league will catch up to you at some point, but can he provide enough wrinkles and enough nuances that's going to keep linebackers and the green dot guys guessing when they're lining up. And I think if you can do that, then you will have a chance. It's just how long you can extend that sort of that element of surprise for.
Yeah, I think since the running back position, nothing I think shows the kind of brutality and the short lifespan of running back. The fact that Todd Gurley hasn't played an NFL game since 2020, and he's 31. It just shows, kind of guy that was in his prime for so long to then, have such a, career cut short like that. I think it just goes to show the fragility of the position. But let's head to our next segment, which is going to be our win, loss, or tie segment. So for those who are listening to this podcast for the first time, each fan that comes on predicts their team's overall record by going through each game and answering with win, loss, or tie. So Euan, week 1, you were on the road to the Los Angeles Rams. Win, lose, or tie?
Based on I don't think Stafford will be out there. Win.
Okay, so then week 2, it's your first home game of the season. This is one you're going to against the Buccaneers at home.
No. I'll be there Thursday night. Football for Buffalo is the one I'm going to get.
Okay. So yeah, Buccaneers at home. Win, lose, or tie?
Win.
Okay, so then week 3, you are back on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
We are just so overdue a loss there. I can't remember the last time we did lose, so I'm going to go loss on that one.
Okay, so in week 4, you are at home to the Tennessee Titans.
Win, because we're due them after last year. That was the worst loss of the season last year, yeah, so winning that one.
Okay, so week 5, you're on the road to the Baltimore Ravens.
That's the road game I'll be at. And I'm due a performance on the road. I've not seen one for quite a while, so I'm going to go win and put a marker down in the league.
Is it your first time in Baltimore for a game?
It will be, yeah. And I think that's the beauty of this. You get to go to some places you would just never normally go. But it will be, so I'll be looking forward to that. Go and visit Washington for the day, see if Donald's in and what's happening. But yeah, no, I should be looking forward to that. And just seems like a kind of old school town, so I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, it's one of the best I've experienced. It's such a good stadium.
Yeah.
So week 6, you're on a bye weeks. Then week 7, you're staying on the road, but this time against the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, it's a win.
Another good stadium right there in Seattle.
Yeah, done that one. I recommend that to anybody if you get a chance to go.
It's so good. Thankfully, I was
it's
there.
Fucking loud. I think that's the thing. Just for the curvature of the stadium, it's I've never been to many stadiums where my ears were actually sore with noise, but yeah, they were that day. So I'd recommend if you get a chance.
Yeah, what I loved as well, the fact that you could see inside the stadium from nowhere near your seat. So I don't know whether you go in the same way as I did, but when I came in, because I was sat with the 12, so I was in that part of the stadium going in, and you walk in and you can see. Because most times you go to any football game. I went to a game on the weekend in the Championship in Leicester, and you don't see the view from your seat until you're in the seat. But I found when I went to Lumen Field was you get in a bit where you scan your ticket, and then there's that free fall where you can go to this section or that section to get to your seat. I remember you could see really far in advance inside the stadium. It's a really unique stadium, and I was thankfully there when it was warm. I went at September time. I think it's got a reputation of being rainy and windy and cold, but I found when I was there, I kind of felt like I was there for their heat wave. It was a good time to go.
Big time. So
week 8, you're back at home for the first time since week 4, and you are hosting the San Francisco 49ers.
Win.
Okay, so then week 9, you are at home to the Denver Broncos.
Loss. I think the habit this team are going to need to get out of is beating teams that they should beat. And obviously Denver's got a good defense, reigning defensive player of the year and all that. But yeah, there'll be games that this team will cough up, and if they crack that habit, I think you've got a good chance of getting home field advantage. But I don't know if it's quite this year that'll happen yet.
So then, going on to week 10, you are at home to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Win.
Okay, so then week 11 is a road game against the Tennessee Titans.
Win.
Okay.
And anyway, we need to do the double over the history thieves at some point, I think. So it's not happened regularly enough as it should have done. For all their crassness and all their H-Town Blue shenanigans. So yeah, if we could do the double over them, I think there's many people, most of all the controlling owners, I think they'd love that the most. So I think we'll do that this year.
So week 12, you are at home to the Buffalo Bills.
I'll be there that night, but I don't think I'll see us win both the games I go to. So I'm going to, as much as it pains me, loss.
So week 14, you're taking on the Indianapolis Colts at Lucas Oil Stadium.
I'm going to go loss again.
Okay. So week 14, your penultimate away game of the regular season as you take on the Kansas City Chiefs.
No, go loss again.
So week 15, you are at home to the Arizona Cardinals.
Win.
So week 16, you are at home to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Win.
And sticking with the AFC West, in week 17, your final road game of the season, in the regular season, as you take on the Los Angeles Chargers at SoFi Stadium.
Lost in that one. Revenge for the playoffs.
Okay, I love that. So week 18, you are at home to the Indianapolis Colts for the final time this episode. Win, lose, or tie.
A win on that one. What does that take us to?
That makes you 11-6, which, especially in your division, would easily get you in the playoffs. With that record, how far are you going in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think I think that's probably realistic. I think, if you really want, 12, 13 games won, I think gives you a right chance at that point to get home field advantage, because I think that's what we need, to break that this duck of never being able to win an AFC Championship game. So I think that's the or make it there. So yeah, that's the aim, and but yeah, not getting home field advantage. If that was the record, I think that would be a struggle for us. But it's exciting. I think when you look at it all out, because it always comes out quicker than you think as well, doesn't it? So looking forward to the real stuff coming around, and hopefully, we'll be repaid at some point with the loyalty, and we'll get a good run. I mean, I think financially, physically, mentally, I think getting to the Super Bowl would be a lot, but but you got to do it at some point. Everybody gets a chance at some point, it feels like. So could this be it? The years of almost and maybes and just not quite enough is it shapes you, makes you a bit more sort of healthy cynicism, I suppose I'd probably call it. But yeah, I hope we can. I hope we can just get to the AFC Championship game, kind of what we did last year, and be better in the big moments. And if we get there, then the cards will fall where they fall at that point. But yeah, no, looking forward to it, and thanks very much. Not been recording much, just moved not long ago, so my life's all been a bit upside down. But yeah, good to talk again, dust the mic off. So appreciate the time and the invite.
Well, before we go on to our fan section, tell the audience how they can find your podcast on socials.
Yeah, it's just at Podcast Texans on everything. I'm not a big social media person, really. I'm trying to be now, but I'm not very good at it. But yeah, Podcast Texans. The turn up for what podcast? It's on all mediums. We've not really done an episode for a while, but going to need to start getting back on and recording when the real stuff comes on. I think the off-season conjecture, I think you can be quite repetitive unless you're sort of close enough to the team and physically and emotionally. Sometimes the off season is there's a lot that can go on. It's just conjecture, but yeah, looking forward to doing it. The real stuff, and you got real tape to watch, and the objective outcomes of games. I think is the bit you want to be talking about and learning about. So yeah, looking forward to it. But yeah, if anybody's a Texas fan, if you're not joined, come along, and we'll hopefully be hitting the red button in a couple of weeks when we get going here.
Lovely stuff. So let's head into Fan Asks Fan. So for those of you that are new to this podcast, we're introducing a brand new segment to this year's off-season predictions, season preview episodes. So each fan that comes on answers the question from the previous guest, whilst also then asking a question to our next guest. So our last guest was Greg Kett in our Tennessee Titans season preview, and he wanted to ask you, Euan, what is your favourite touchdown from your team's history?
Oh, that was a big one. The screen pass that DeAndre Hopkins took back to the house in Seattle, Watson's rookie year, was a big one. It didn't actually mean anything because we ended up losing that game and we really should have won it. And then the other one I was torn between in my head was, I don't know if you remember, just after the Laramie Tunsil trade, and Kenny Stills came over in that trade, and the safety just bit down in New Orleans that Monday night. I can't remember who the guy's name was in the safety, but he just bit down on the play, and then Kenny Stills took it in, and we took the lead with about 46 seconds to go, but then Breeze went to them up the field, and they kicked the last minute field. Will Lutz, I think, was the kicker at that time, kicked the field goal. So yeah, they're two that stand out big to me as well. And then I think the biggest moment was when I was talking about that 2014 game in Dallas, and Arian Foster took it in just to take it to overtime, and he turned around to the camera and he said, "This is our house," and that was a big moment, I think. So there's been a few, but not enough that's meant something. I think that's statement wins. I think something we've probably struggled with as a ball club, and I think that's something we'll have to do. And like I sort of referenced there in that Baltimore thing, I think that's you need that to put some respect on the name, as you hear people say. I think that's what we need to do this year. So, but hopefully a big moment like that again in one of those games.
Amazing stuff. And then finally, what is your question to our next team season previews guest?
What team is it?
Can't tell you. It's all surprise for the audience. That's
right. Okay. Oof. What's your favourite off-field story from either a current or former player?
Okay, so you can find out what our next guest says to that question, which is their favourite off-season story from a current or former player.
Off-field, so nothing to do with football. So I'm tempted to say Ed Reed, but was it not he got done in having like a threesome with a couple of women and his wife, and it all went very public and stuff. So yeah, funny off-field stories because these guys take a lot of blows to the head and they do sort of crazy things off the field. So I sometimes think that adds to the soap opera of it all as well, you know. So I think something like that would be what I'm angling at.
Well, there we are. You'll find out the answer in the next episode. But in the meantime, Euan, thank you for coming on.
No, thank you very much. And I thought it was Ed Reed, by the way, in case he tries to sue me. But thanks. Thank you. And no, I really appreciate the time. And anytime, just reach out if I can help. I will do.
Absolutely. I'm sure you'll hear Euan's voice again if you are listening to this podcast. But that has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast, Houston Texans 2025 season preview. I have been, as ever, your guest today, Andy Davis, with our guest today in Turner for What, Euan. And we'll see you guys for our next team's season preview. Take care.